I don't know, if I am in a little box and you need me to be in a bigger box, then just say, and Cora will do our best to do something about that. So Cora's given me a lovely introduction there, and I think the summary of that is that I really love having questions, and I really like talking to people. I'm very, very friendly. And so this evening is not so much me telling you everything. It's more a chance to raise these issues and for you to reflect on them for yourself. And within that, you can, of course, ask me any questions, and I'll help as best as I can. But it really is a chance for you to explore this subject for yourself. Oh, it says you may need to change your view, Cora, to just show Emma's screen for your recording. So Cora, if you go into the top right-hand corner of your screen, there should be a little thing that says view. That you may need to change, I suspect. Now, while Cora's doing that, I do encourage you to have a piece of paper and a pen with you because of the reflective nature of these Conscious Cafe meetings, both for yourself and then later for the breakout groups that we will organise, what Cora's going to organise. You're right there, Cora. Is it working out?
I'm not quite
Tracy,
sure how to. I've got you on the main screen.
Oh,
I'm not quite sure what.
That's fine. It sounded like you just wanted to capture Emma. So as long as you, Cora, have just got Emma as your main screen, then that's what.
then it'll be all right.
Recorded.
Okay. I think we have to be just a little bit careful in case anybody wants to be shy or private or anything like that in terms of recording things. So
the only thing is, I still have a small picture at the top of people. I'm not sure how to get rid of that. Do I have to pin?
No, you don't need to, Cora. It's absolutely fine. So all that will be recorded is there's the person that is speaking on your main screen.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to try and share. There we go. Oh, right, there we go. So what I thought I'd do, I just put some points together, and so these are going to be some reflective points. And I know you're on mute, but I'm really happy to take questions. Maybe at the end of the slides, we'll have some question and answers first. So I put there reflections on fulfillment from a coach and a Buddhist, because Cora, whilst being my biggest fan, it seems, is always very keen that, you know, I make sure you understand that I'm not trying to get lots of little Buddhists after any of my talks. You know, it's so we put both of those ideas in there. Right, let me just do next. So I put some key reflections here. So first of all, this first question for you, is there a difference between happiness and fulfillment? And I ask that because happiness is a word we hear a lot. The subject of happiness now is discussed, millions of books written about it, organizations for it, in a way which, God, I never heard growing up. No one talked about happiness. So there's really been a change there. So you may have a view on what you think happiness is. You may have a view on what fulfillment is. And is there a difference for you? So I suggest you take a couple of moments and just reflect on what happiness means for you and what fulfillment means for you, and if there is a difference. And I'll, you know, refer to that point a little bit later, and I think it's a theme that should underlie this evening generally. Then my next question is, if there is a difference, does that link to your sense of values, a particular philosophy, or a spiritual tradition, this idea of happiness and fulfillment? And if there is a difference, what's the root of that difference, do you think? Now, I put at this put at the start reflections on fulfillment from a coach and a Buddhist. And many of you may not know about coaching. Some of you may even be coaches. And within the discipline of coaching, there are many methods and methodologies which cross many traditions, from psychoanalysis to you know, many theories of how a human operates in terms of their search for happiness and fulfillment. And coaches often help people who are in tricky places where they're not quite sure what they want to do, what happiness or fulfillment means for them. And so it offers various ways to examine that question. And what I've put here is just simply one of those ways, because there are many, many, many. So I could have chosen so many different models. So I'm not saying this is coaching, this model. It's just one little idea of it, okay? And this is, I've put here a simple model, is McClellan's social values, right? And this is about what motivates a human, okay? Which is just such a huge subject, isn't it? But obviously what motivates a human is an important question in terms of achieving happiness and fulfillment. So this is what he says. He says that every person has one of three main driving motivators. This is his idea, okay? And so he says they fall into three buckets: the need for achievement, the need for affiliation, or the need for power. He also says something very interesting, which these motivators are not inherent. They develop through our culture and life experiences. And there are many aspects of coaching which might inquire into why we've adopted certain ways of behavior. And it's usually to make the best of a situation we find ourselves in, or to achieve our goals. We adopt certain ways of behavior which weren't inherent to us. So this model would fall into that. Just to clarify, I'm just going to give you a little bit more detail on these three different motivational needs, as he calls them. So if your motivation is for achievement, he says this kind of person, highest importance on achieving, on doing things well, making efficient use of time and resources to achieve more, performing better, outperforming others with high internal standards of excellence. So that, you know, somebody who's motivated in that way to achieve will, you know, he says will have those sorts of characteristics. The person who is motivated by what he calls affiliation, their highest priority is on avoiding conflict and maintaining good relations. They're concerned about separation or disruption of relationships. And so they have this strong need for social connection and positive group activities, etc. That's their need. And then the third one, the need for power, is they prefer positions of prestige and influence to have an impact on what happens. And they often have feelings of wishing to be perceived as strong, effective, influential. Yeah. So, you know, these are these three buckets, and I'm not saying they're the whole picture, but, you know, it could be one model that through asking these sort of questions, what is motivating people, which of these buckets do they sit in, that they can then determine in what way they would feel fulfilled or they would feel happy. When I looked at this model, for me, there was a lot missing with it. And I quite like noticing what's missing from coaching models. So from a Buddhist perspective, it leaves a lot out, in my opinion. But it is an interesting coaching model, and you can reflect on it and talk in your breakout groups later and ask me some questions in a moment. From a Buddhist perspective, I just jotted down a few points here. So from a Buddhist perspective, we would always distinguish between temporary happiness, which is often defined as worldly happiness, and a state of permanent happiness. In the Buddhist texts, you don't really find the word fulfillment, but you do find a huge amount of literature on the nature of happiness. So let me just clarify that. We're not saying that normal everyday happiness is not valuable. It's simply that happiness which comes from worldly material things is subject to change, and therefore it's temporary. So we have a, you know, if you look in your life, you'll have seen there'll be people you've got on with, and then maybe you don't get on with them anymore, or there'll be dresses that you liked and then they fell apart, or whatever, right? So the nature of that happiness is temporary. From a Buddhist point of view, permanent happiness is a stable state of mind of permanent happiness, and it comes through lots of different trainings, and it's a rare thing. It's a rare thing. It's a mental state, and it's a rare thing. Yeah. So we would look at those distinctions, and I know, as I say, in culture now, we use the word happiness so often, but in Buddhist terms, it's really something we inquire into. And so, yeah, that's enough of that. You can ask me some questions. The second point is that Buddhist texts emphasize the precious nature of sentient life. That's all life that can have feeling to it. And it particularly emphasizes what is called the precious opportunity of a human life, which is seen as a very rare form of life, a very unusual form of life compared to the number of worms there are, or fleas there are, or, you know, there's a lot more. Whenever you stay in a monastery in Bhutan, well, at first I used to get a lot of flea bites, and I'm convinced there were far more fleas than humans in those monasteries. So although we may not consider it when we look at our own being, from a Buddhist point of view, to have the opportunity of a human life is actually very rare. And so it's rare to find, it's rare to keep, is how they look at it. And it's rare because it has the possibility to help both your own being and limitless other beings. So any notion of fulfillment or happiness is bound to be linked to helping other beings from a Buddhist perspective. A Buddhist perspective, the final point there, thinks in a time frame of many lives, not just this one. And again, it's something you might want to discuss a little bit more. But when one has the sense, the time frame of many lives, it does tend to change one's perspective in lots of different ways, I think. And perhaps it helps with the temporary nature of happiness, as we might call it in the worldly life. You know, perhaps one is, I don't know, less disturbed when you think you've got many, many lifetimes to come. And you're probably more cautious of not harming others also, because you've got many lifetimes to come. But big subjects here. Anyway, just a few points on happiness, fulfillment, more from a Buddhist point of view now. So I made it into H&F there. I think there's like a clothing company that H&M or something. So I thought we'll have H&F, happiness and fulfillment. I thought I'd bring that as a new brand. So if we look here as what other people say, happiness, even in many other texts that aren't Buddhist, may sometimes also have this feeling of something which is shorter term. Fulfillment tends to be talked about as something which is longer term and more sustained. Happiness is seen as something which may come from many things. Fulfillment tends to be seen as something which is linked to a sense of purpose. So it doesn't come from so many things. It has this sense of purpose at its heart. Happiness, clearly, as we know, can be more hedonistic or self-focused. And fulfillment tends to be linked to something greater than yourself for many people, and we'll be discussing this. And this wonderful quote from Viktor Frankl, I'm sure many of you have read his incredible books and looked at the theories that he developed in his life. Man's main concern is not to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, but rather to see a meaning in his life. From a Buddhist point of view, we often talk about freeing the mind from being in a state of constantly wanting things or of trying to avoid things. That would be called a state of attachment or a state of aversion. And so there's a link there really with this wonderful statement of his. So I put down some key questions here for your personal reflection and to go into the breakout groups with, which we'll do in a little while. So it might be good to drop these questions down. So what brings you happiness in your own life? And what brings you fulfillment in your own life? Again, an extension of that question of if they are different. And how do these reflections link to an idea of the 3 types of needs, motivational needs that McClellan spoke of? The need to achieve, the need to have affiliation or collaboration with others, and the need for power and to affect things, maybe to affect change. And how much to motivations and ideas which are not included in his model, which are outside his model. And then I just put at the end there, because we're at such a fascinating time, this particular moment. How have the last few months impacted these reflections? Because they may well have done. Your definition of happiness or fulfillment may have gone through quite a radical change due to the impact of the last few months. So if you just make sure you've got those general points down. And I would say that this final page here is very typical of a kind of coaching approach. So a question from a coaching point of view, which is not telling you what to think, it's encouraging you to reflect. We tend to have the nature of these open questions. So an open question would be, what brings you happiness in your own life? It's an open question, not a leading question or a closed question. Open questions are the best way that somebody else is asking them of you, or you're asking them of yourself. Find a creative, open to it. So what brings you happy in your own life? It's an open question. What brings you fulfillment in own life? How do these reflections link to an idea? These are all very open style questions that cannot be answered with a yes and a no answer. So they encourage us into a space of our own reflection. So this is why I did them like this. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. There we go. Brilliant. Okay. And maybe if we could unmute people, Laura, I think it would be good to take any questions from any of those slides and to make sure if there's anything which needs to be clarified, because we've got a few minutes before we go into the breakout room. And I've just touched on so many potentially profound areas there. So has anybody got any questions for me at this time?
Because I can't unmute people, they have to unmute themselves.
Oh,
Just
is it?
like,
Okay.
no, everybody, if they want to ask a question,
Brilliant.
or they could put it into the chat box and I'll read it out if they prefer.
You can do. I'm quite friendly though, if you do want to actually speak out loud with your question. I think Janet there has, is it Janet who is in, Janet and David, was it? Yes, Janet and Dave in Cambridge. Have you unmuted in order to ask me a question?
Oh no, just unmuted to join in. I'm still
Just,
thinking
okay,
about
perfect.
these interesting
That's
things.
okay. No question yet.
No questions, just friendliness. Okay, that's absolutely perfect. All right. How about everybody else? Any other questions at this point?
Okay, can I
Yes.
ask something? Just a little. I mean, I think that thing of that affiliation. Would you say is that so? It's just, can you just elaborate and say again what affiliation, what motivation that or value that is? What?
So this is the really people-y one. It's the one where people, if you think, you know, you have achievement and you have a position of power, and you have the people-y one who likes to collaborate, be in a lot of contact with people. It says your highest priority is on avoiding conflict, making good relations. Yeah, that's something you're really motivated by.
Okay.
So if you take, and maybe you could just mull over people you know in your family, or maybe people that you've worked with. Some people it's very obvious. You can just, you know, you can just see. I mean, if you want to put me in the category, Cora, after that long introduction, you'd probably put me into the achieving category, because I endlessly need to get another qualification or you know, write another thing or whatever it is. Okay, so if you think about it, if you can't quite work it out with somebody, sort of turn them into a cartoon character of themselves, a sort of exaggerated, hammed up version of themselves, as if their strengths are the only, you know, they've got a bit overblown in a way, you know, like a theatrical version of themselves. That will probably give you an indication of which one of these somebody is in. Does that make sense?
So what would you say Donald Trump was?
Well, I would imagine it's power. I would imagine it's power, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and I imagine a lot of that's a lot of the politicians are as well. So, yeah.
Yes, I mean, I suspect so. Now, Diana said here, can we not be more than just one? Yes, indeed. And in fact, you, very, very good point. Sometimes you could display these as a Venn diagram where they're overlapping. But I was trying to make it very, wasn't trying to make it too complicated, because for some people they wouldn't, you know, they might not have encountered this before. So I was being quite sort of clear about it. But of course there'll be overlapping. And I think we all know that the more we understand humans, whether by interacting with them or studying them in many disciplines, in the end, you know, it's so complicated. You know, you look at values, you try and pin your values down. It's, you know, then you realize your values interlink, and you know, your strengths, and you'll have a lot of strengths. You won't have just one strength. But this is just a simple way. But I would imagine that they would interlink. Interestingly enough, some people say that when people are under stress, they would tend to default into you know, one of these kind of motivations. So if somebody's very, very stressed, they'll just want to achieve more, or they want to, if they're very stressed and they're a power person, they'll want to have all the power to themselves. They get very sort of controlling, you know, I'm going to sort it all out, etc., etc. Again, if you're not sure of what tends to motivate somebody, think of what happens to them under stress, and that will usually give you some insight, actually.
Emma, could I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm the invisible one.
Okay.
Is this really a tool of cultivating self-awareness rather than a tool for trying to somehow manipulate oneself to have a more balanced, less dominant need?
Yeah, this will be more about self-awareness in the sense that I guess that coaching would say that you have to understand what drives you, what motivates you, if you're going to have a chance of having those motivations met and therefore feeling happy and fulfilled.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks.
Emma, sorry.
Yes, hello.
Hello. I'm similar to you in the sense that I'm like to achieve and I do lots of qualifications. I'm always looking at the next thing. But sometimes I feel I'm slightly conflicted. So I've always wanted to sort of help and work in a helping profession, but then at the same time, the pay is not that great. So then that's a conflict because I value financial stability, but the types of work I'm going into is not as well paid as, say, like a corporate job. So there's that kind of juxtaposition. So I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that, I guess.
So the conflict there has been wishing to, let me just clarify, it's wishing to achieve.
Yes.
But wanting financial security, but wanting to help people.
Yeah, and just the nature of the jobs that I've gone into before have been, you know, in the carer profession, but not financially rewarded. So
in terms of coming back to our question of what is happiness for you and what is fulfillment for you,
yeah,
if you look at it from that perspective, is it that the caring profession somehow is more fulfilling, but maybe sort of more temporary happiness is coming from the financial and maybe the achieving? Does it help to look at it through that lens?
Yeah, I think that's true actually, because I couldn't imagine myself in any other sector in a way. So yeah,
so this is the point about using these questions, and we'll go into the breakout groups shortly, and in order to reflect on them and find some further insight into our own life and what motivates us and maybe the decisions we want to make, you know.
Emma, we're talking about work there for Simone, but obviously fulfillment doesn't need to be in a workplace setting for her. We don't have to consider achievement always at work. It can be all sorts of different ways one can find that fulfillment that you're seeking.
That, I think,
I'm not trying to teach, I'm just saying we don't need to think always about work.
Yeah, and that is that's a really good point, and that's where I find some of the coaching models come up short, because they appear to be very much geared into the work environment. And I said that some aspects, particularly for the people that I talk to a lot, is on things which are about their essential being, how they make sense of the profound thing that it is to be a human, their spiritual life, etc., their inner world, their inner landscape. So that's why I say that sometimes I'm, with these models, they're very useful, but sometimes they don't take us far enough. And that's why I put in the question there, how do these reflections link to an idea of the 3 types of needs McClellan speaks of? How much the motivations and ideas that are outside his model. So you may look at his model and think, it's a useful framework for going, no, actually, you know what? Fulfillment for me actually isn't any of those things. Or if it is, it's that, but it's also this. So I'm not saying to follow the model. Sometimes it's really useful to look at a model and think, wait a minute, that's not got it all in there for me. And his model hasn't for me either. So I was being a bit provocative, putting it there. And it's a really, really interesting point as to how much of, this idea of happiness and fulfillment for many people does just exist in work. and how much it doesn't, how much it goes into areas where maybe the words achievement or power or affiliation, maybe they don't cover it all actually.
Can I ask, is there any suggestion that one of those three categories is better than
No,
either of the other two?
No.
For me, I have a feeling that somehow affiliation is sort of a more desirable quality.
No. There's no, from his model, there's none. There's none of that. That would probably be much more to do with your own perception and values, I suspect. Yes.
I was thinking about our internal journey in looking at these three things.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the achievement is something like compassion, peace, love, health, balance. And affiliation is like connection, interconnection, love, family, cooperation. And power for me would be play, creativity, and having your voice.
Well, I think that sounds wonderful, Maggie. You have rewritten his model, and I think that's great. And that's exactly the kind of thing that's wonderful to do when you're really looking at what does happiness and fulfillment mean to me, because he hasn't said that.
No.
You have reframed his model. Brilliant.
So that's what those things mean to me. And also they fit together. There's a way in which, if you're talking about those things, they all fit together to make a whole.
Okay, do you want to say it again? Because I think we should all benefit from hearing this again. Would you say this reframing again?
I immediately wrote down under achievement, balance, peace, love, good health, because that's what I would like to achieve. That's what I think we're here to achieve. And compassion, because all of those things are what make us essentially, whole human beings. Affiliation, I would see as cooperation, love, connection, and family. And power, I see as playfulness, creativity, having our voice. And those three things, to me, fit together rather than compete with each other. They're like a circle that connects with each other. But that's just,
So that, what I'm hearing is you're fleshing out a landscape of what happiness and fulfillment means for you. You're naming it and you're seeing how it interconnects. You're sort of building that universe for yourself, isn't it? Which is great. When you talked about the qualities of achievement there, compassion, etc., etc., etc. If you're an achieving person, it's just the priority and the intensity with which you would put behind getting those done, right? So you've talked more about the content, but if you look at achievement, it says the highest importance is on achieving. So whatever list you've just put out there, the point is an achieving person will want to achieve that most of all. They'll be really, whatever it is, they'll really put their energy in there. They'll want to get it done. They'll want to have achieved it. Okay.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've forgotten your name that we're just speaking now.
Maggie, that was.
Maggie, I think what you said was wonderful, but I think it was very personal, which all of our views are. So to counter that completely the opposite way, the first thing, I'm a very competitive person. I've always done sports and competed, and I'm obsessive compulsive about it as well. So achievement for me personally is a completely different thing. When I saw that, was it fulfillment? Yes. Fulfillment, that was the first thing that resonated with me, was to achieve my goals of being the best I can at doing what I do at the sport that I now do. And I also felt they were to a certain extent interconnected. That was why I asked the question. But it's interesting how different, completely polar opposite views of what fulfillment is, and they're right for us personally, I guess. I don't know if somebody's got another
Well, I think that's what we should, that's a really great reflection. And I think that's the spirit with which we should go into the breakout rooms, because this is really the chance in smaller groups of 4 friendly people. We're going to put you into these breakout groups, and it's a chance for you to continue that reflection, and you can write it down, you can map it out, you can have your own whole model, you can have your own model, personal model at the end of the course, about, if you remember, what brings you happiness in your life, what brings you fulfillment in your life. And I'm sure that will touch on that question of you know, the difference between the two. You can think about the McClellan model, what's not there. You can make your own model. And then, as I say, just consider how the last few months have impacted these reflections. If you would have created the same model, I'm just thinking, this time last year, I've lost track of the months. So there we go. This time last year, we didn't know about COVID, so it's a safe time frame to bring up. So just think if you would have done something different there, or what component has come in through your experience in the last few months, in a redefining of happiness and fulfillment for you. How does that sound, Diana? Does it sound all right to go away and do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it would be interesting to.
Yeah, so share and give yourself maybe you know, a little bit of time to reflect. Share. The one thing is important is to have somebody brave in the group who'd like to feedback when we all come back. So it's always good to get somebody to vote themselves into that position right at the start. And then I think Cora will put you into breakout groups, and you'll have a number. It'll say you're going into breakout group number 1, 2, 3, 4. Try as hard as you might to remember what number you're in, because when we come back, it just helps things, organizing things, doesn't it, Cora?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think,
if that thing, if somebody can sort of take the lead in the group and sort of say, I'll feed back, you know, and if you can also, we're sort of planning on about 18 to 20 minutes, and so if you're, and there should be 4 people in a group, and just sort of try and split it so everyone talks about 4 minutes. You know, I know I've been in these, and sometimes at the end of it, one person hasn't had a turn, so try and split it. And Emma and I might be able to pop in and sort of see how you're getting on. We'll see if that works. So don't be surprised if one of us does. So I'll organise that now, shall I?
Yeah, and then we'll all share, and we'll just see what comes out of it. Hopefully some insight and some personal reflection of use will come out of it, and then we'll share and go from there.
Okay, I'm just seeing if there's somebody who's got to leave, unfortunately. It might not be exactly 4 in each group, but it's very clever how it does it. You just have to click to accept to go into the breakout room, and then you will magically find yourself with 2 or 3 other people.
Thank
you. Let's do the. Right, where's the breakout? Breakout. Is
that all right, Cora?
It should be happening now. Open all rooms, and should all be disappearing into rooms. Right.